I'm Diego Sanchez, president of HousingWire, and this is 10-Minute Talks. My guest today is Jake Reiter, and he's the CEO of the mortgage division at Granite Bank. Jake, thank you so much for joining me today on 10-Minute Talks.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Diego.
And before we dive in, could you briefly introduce yourself and Granite Bank?
Sure, be happy to. So I'm Jake Reiter. I'm happy to be a lifelong community banker who has now really gotten deep into the mortgage business. And, my background in banking started from an early age. Proud to grow up with my dad being in banking. He actually himself didn't grow up in banking, grew up on a dairy farm, but he spent his whole professional career in banking. So I knew from a young age that that's what I wanted to do. So I ended up following in his footsteps, got into it really on the commercial side of the bank. And over time, worked at a couple other banks, came back to join my dad. And that was right around the time that he had made the leap of faith from going from working for another bank for a number of years to really working to acquire a bank of his own. And so that kind of dovetails into the story of our bank is one where we're a 123-year-old bank, but we're really first generation in terms of my family's ownership of it. And so it's really been a fun ride. I get to work with my dad, two of my younger brothers every day, and we came in and acquired this bank in 2015 with a small group of investors, and it's been since that time that we've used the platform to stay true to who we are as a local community bank in central Minnesota and in the Twin Cities, but then also expanding more broadly into the mortgage space on a national basis.
Yeah, let's talk more about that. So what's the geographic footprint on the retail banking side? And then we can talk a little bit more about the mortgage business.
Sure. Yeah, so our roots go to Cold Spring, Minnesota, which is a small town outside of St. Cloud, about an hour and a half west of the Twin Cities. And so our headquarters are there. That's where a good chunk of our retail presence is in central Minnesota. And then we're also in the Twin Cities metro area. That's where we do a lot of our commercial banking, depository, things of that nature is done there. And
so you've already talked a little bit about pushing into mortgage. What does that look like?
Yeah. So it really came about kind of through, I would say, just seeking out opportunities and coincidence. About, I'd say 8 years ago or so, we happened to get to know an IMB in the Twin Cities, and it was through that experience they were looking for some banking relationships, and we ended up doing all the construction financing for them, and it turned into being a really big line of business for us. And I got to see under the hood of a business that's seemingly doing the same thing that we are, but they were doing it in a different way. I call it a mortgage attitude compared to maybe what you're accustomed to. What bankers are known for is maybe being less urgent, maybe a little more conservative. And I was kind of taken aback by going, there's a whole nother way to do this business that doesn't come at the expense of the community bank. And so we got to see how it was done differently. And we set about at that time knowing that we were going to basically take the best attributes of what an IMB is and the best attributes of a community bank and pull those things together and try and be something that's different and unique, both on the banking side of the world, but then also in mortgage. And so that fast forward, building relationships through that has enabled us to kind of build that from, I would say, the ground up. I'll back up though, like our bank has been doing mortgage for, over 40 years. It's your typical community bank with an LO in the lobby. And so we had a lot of the things set up for that. It was just taking it and getting set up to go on a much broader scale nationally while still keeping that local footprint from a retail banking standpoint.
Right. So let's unpack that a little bit more.
Sure.
I would imagine that you have sort of a distributed retail presence sort of in the areas that you are a community bank in, but then it sounds like you have something that's more national in scope. Is that pushing into the wholesale channel, or what are you doing on a national scale?
Yeah, I would say mostly retail. I think, right now I'll still say that, 2/3 of our business is taking place in Minnesota, in the surrounding states. But we do have the ability now as we're growing in our operational headquarters and everything else is in Minnesota. So I'll be, clear about that. But as far as the ability to, go into markets where we maybe have some clients where they're buying a second home in Arizona or Florida, we'll be able to go into those markets and also provide the mortgage lending services there. I think the platform, of course, as a bank, it gives you some the ability to lend into other states, and so we've been able to leverage that as well. And it's purely from a retail basis, not on a wholesale channel at all.
And is when you're lending in places that are outside of the bank's geographic footprint, are you doing that through a partner, or are you getting licensed in those areas, in those states?
We're getting licensed in those areas and in those states. Yep.
That's really interesting. And so, as you think about your team of originators, are you trying to push originators into some of these other geographies, or are you originating with your team that's based in your geographic footprint?
Yeah. So it's really been, those that have come to us saying, hey, we're local to this market. We're looking for a partner that might fit what we're about. And I think you being a smaller company that does have, maybe a different type of business model and aspirations has we found to be attractive. People maybe coming from a larger company that want a smaller, more of a family feel. And so that's what I think we've found is that people maybe come from other geographies and then they will want to work for us. So, for us, to be able to open, say, a loan production office in another state is something that, has been advantageous. And so that's been a more recent thing, I would say within the last 12 months, really. But, that's how we're growing.
And are you taking all the mortgages that you do wherever they are, and are you putting them in your portfolio and servicing them? Or are you, putting them out in the secondary market? Tell me how that looks.
Yeah, the vast majority are going in the secondary market. We still love our what we call our common sense portfolio underwriting. We still do that, particularly in our home markets. Your backyard community lending. That's something that we have done and will continue to do.
And do you have aspirations to be, a big lender someday in mortgage, and to kind of like climb the ranks in distributed retail, or how are you thinking about this mortgage business?
Yeah, it's one that I think is full of opportunity. We're going to be smart about it. I think growth for the sake of growth might come at the detriment of your company and your company culture. And so, we do want to grow. We do have aspirations to climb that ladder, through distributed retail, but do so in a way that's smart and that's incremental, and one that ultimately is fruitful for the bank and promotes the bank at the same time that it is just mortgage. So they go hand in hand. But we started doing this with rates skyrocketing to their highest level in years, and it's kind of been fun doing it in an environment where that's really all we know. And so we see this as something where we're built to do that, and it's now, I think, top of the funnel for the bank in terms of we'll be able to capitalize on other lines of business, because mortgage is, I think it's one of the greatest points in a relationship with a client where they're making their biggest life decision, and so you're able to do so many other things that are value adds as a bank.
Could we see Granite Bank move a retail presence into some of these other places if they start to be markets that are doing really well for you from a mortgage perspective?
Well, coming off of being negative 25 degrees in Minnesota just a couple of weeks ago, I think that there's some markets that I wouldn't be opposed to maybe having a more permanent retail presence. It's certainly a possibility. There's no immediate plans to, but I think we're ones that take opportunities as they come. We don't just say no to things. We want to be thoughtful about everything that comes our way.
So last question, because we're right around the 10-minute mark here. Tell me a little bit more about working with your family. I could see pros and cons
Yeah.
to doing that on a daily basis and kind of mixing your life and your work.
Yeah. I think I'm one of the really fortunate ones. It's one of the greatest blessings I've ever had. The ability to mix, work and family, it becomes one and the same. And yeah, we talk shop, outside of work, but it's always done in such a way where we have a mutual respect for one another. And so I do recognize that that's maybe the exception, not the rule. And so it's been fun to kind of share a dream, with my dad, and also, with my mom, with my brothers, and to be able to honestly just have a platform to be an entrepreneur. We all don't take that lightly. And so it's pretty cool. It's like the American dream. You get to do it with your family, you get to build a business, and it's been a really wonderful thing.
Well, Jake, thank you so much for again joining me on 10 Minutes Talks today. This has been a really interesting conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, Diego. Appreciate it.